We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast's discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 113. I'm your host, Chris Webster, with my co-host, Paul Zimmerman. Today we talk to Zach Beier about his work in Jamaican archaeology. Let's get to it. Our interview today is with Zach Beier. He's the archaeology lecturer and lab director at the University of the West Indies, UWI, Mona in Kingston, Jamaica. His research focuses on the archaeology and heritage of the Caribbean at both prehistoric and historic sites, and principally the diversity of human encounters in this emergent modern world. Zach's work in the lab and field relies on advanced tools, including scientific dating, 3D and geochemical analysis of artifacts and human burials, aerial drone surveys, and big data. He is currently involved in a number of projects spanning an extensive portion of Jamaica's history, including work at Kingston Harbor fortifications, and those date to around 655 to 1945. Also a former sugar plantation works yard, 1750 to 1910, on the campus of the UWI Mona, and at one of the largest indigenous villages in Jamaica, the White Marl Tanayo settlement. And I'm probably saying that wrong. Tino, I think it's Tino settlement, dating from 8900 to 1600. His prior research, including his 2017 dissertation at Syracuse University, examined the diversity of military communities at a British colonial fort on the Caribbean island of Dominica. That dates from 1763 to 1854. Zach combined archaeological data with archival research to better configure the role of military labor in the development of African Caribbean societies. His work in Dominica, which is featured in the volume of case studies of forts from around the British imperial world, was something he co-edited in 2018, and that's called British Forts and Their Communities, Archaeological and Historical Perspectives. That work exemplifies the applicability of theoretically informed and community-focused archaeologies at colonial military sites. All right, welcome to the show, Zach.
Thank you, Paul, Chris, Wagwan, Archaeotech viewers, listeners. It's a pleasure.
No problem. So let's start with just how you got into archaeology. What got you interested in archaeology? I mean, are you of the Indiana Jones age, or was it something else?
I think my mom really saw it as that. I've really supportive parents, and I remember getting into archaeology. My mom's like, "Oh, now we need to get the hat. We need to get the whip. No firearms allowed in this house." But she was really into it. But it's also a story connected to my parents. They're both Americans, but British historians. I was raised over in England, so raised, around history with historians, and just developed this passion specifically for archaeology around hard work, dirt, and remarkable things and stories, I guess. That would be, that's what brought me to the field. I should say maybe a bit as a rebellious child. I mean, my parents were incredibly supportive, but as historians, there's a certain way of producing history or talking about the past. I think I came through the school of rejecting not necessarily what my parents were talking about, but the tradition. And among historians, I gravitated towards specifically anthropology. And that all happened for me at the undergraduate level. I had no real inklings before my undergraduate experience, beyond rolling around Roman roads and other things like that when I was raised in England. Yep.
Nice. Well, that's quite the upbringing, I gotta say. Getting to experience life like that. So having influences over there and being raised in England, what brought you to the Caribbean?
That's a great question. I mean, I'm now in Jamaica, so former British colony, but like others, I think that go to the Caribbean, my first time was on vacation. It was to Puerto Rico. Mainly sun, sand, beaches, some natural heritage sites, those types of things. But through my time in Puerto Rico, got to know the Taino, or at least Taino sites. Visited a few of those there around Ponce, and also began a little bit of research as an undergraduate, kind of toying around with early kind of creative anthropological archaeology ideas, thinking about what signs that people are, using, businesses for a variety of things. What language are they actually written in? So almost like linguistic material culture, and looking at the different patterns of what in a bilingual island, imagined as a bilingual island, when Spanish and when English is being used. So that was my introduction. It started off on a vacation, and I just kind of stayed, I guess.
Nice. I think everybody wishes that would happen.
Yeah, well, and this is how the Caribbean writ large, I guess, is imagined as a place that you vacate, as a place of good music, good food, good beaches. But following that initial introduction to Puerto Rico, I was at Illinois State University for undergraduate, so taking classes from Dr. Charles Orser, Dr. Elizabeth Scott, their definitions of historical archaeology as an archaeology of the modern world, reading people's work like Kathy Deegan, working on Spanish settlements in Hispaniola and a certain degree in Jamaica. That really, that was like the homework that got me down here, and I then applied that to British forts, first in Dominica, and then by 2012 I began my work in Jamaica on forts around Kingston Harbor. Undergraduate then led into just an incredibly valuable, albeit lonely, depressing, hard graduate school experience at Syracuse University, where my introduction to that university was meeting a graduate student working in the Caribbean, Steve Lennick, Dr. Steve Lennick. Now, he was advised by Dr. Douglas Armstrong, who was my dissertation advisor, and it was just a clear focus on the Caribbean, what's happening at the time of contact among Amerindian groups, European groups, and then also the African diaspora. So Syracuse was a great training point to capitalize on initial vacation experiences, then to the experience of serious archaeology.
And what in particular was it about that initial vacation experience that made you think that this was a good place for archaeology?
It wasn't necessarily, I guess, when I first started going to the Amerindian sites, pre-Columbian sites, I needed to do more work and to better understand settlement patterns and lifeways that weren't as apparent above ground. Historical archaeology, especially of forts, sometimes you can't miss them. So I needed to better understand, the evidence, as well as what is a distant time and often, more distant culture than our own. So I needed to do a lot more work to get back into there. I'll tell you, in Puerto Rico, I was walking around Old San Juan, walking through El Morro, which is one of the oldest, largest Spanish forts in the region. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and they've done archaeology there, but more so, it's just a tremendously popular heritage site, not only for visitors like me, but locals. I just remember the kite flying activities going on, people just hanging out on the cleared field on your way into the fort, having their picnics. So, and then, I guess to finish up that is, forts really stuck out to me, but more so the contemporary use of archaeological sites and, the value of, yes, having the information about the past, but also the value in letting people explore, enjoy, create new memories in these places.
You're calling us from Jamaica, and are you living there full time now and working and studying there? Wow. I started the studying process when I was writing out my dissertation. I mentioned my colleague earlier, Dr. Stephen Lennick. He was the lecturer at UE Mona. But we began a project at Fort Rocky. It's a fort in Kingston Harbor, 1880s, World War II. So a really interesting time period in terms of imagining what's going on in the Caribbean during the World War period, which is so often imagined as kind of an old world European experience. So that was my first introduction to doing work here, 2012, 2013, and then took up the position as lecturer in archaeology,
the director of our archaeology lab and curation facility on campus. So since 2014, full time.
Nice. Well, this is the Archaeotech podcast. So let's talk about some of the technological developments that have influenced your work and some of the things you're using down there to push this research forward.
Yeah, I just appreciate the opportunity to talk about not only Jamaica, the Caribbean, but some exciting work that has been going on down here recently. So, look, to begin with, during graduate school, historic archaeology, Syracuse University, one of the first introductions, and not necessarily hands-on, but it was through the work of Mark Hauser and some other folks using thin section petrographic analysis, neutron activation analysis of low-fired coarse earthenwares. These are typically made in the Caribbean, either by indigenous Amerindian folks, but the context that we're talking about, 18th century, 19th century, you're largely dealing with enslaved African individuals making these wares for a variety of different purposes, their own use, but also for trading. He did a fabulous study. The Archaeology of Black Markets is the book where he showcased the scientific application of scientific methods for revealing just the networks and, the levels of freedom, consumer involvement of enslaved Africans during a period that you wouldn't consider that happening. So that was a good introduction for me, not necessarily something that I followed up with my own work at British Forts, but a really valuable introduction. What we've been doing recently, though, in Jamaica, I'm involved with a handful of projects, study of Kingston Harbor fortifications. So you've got a handful of forts there dating between about 1650s all the way up to 1945. Right here on the UWI Mona campus, we've got the ruins of two former sugar plantations that operate between about 1750 up to the beginning of the 1900s. And then really where and technology's been apparent in those projects, but really where it's been apparent at is our work at the White Marl Taino settlement. It's a very large pre-Columbian Amerindian settlement dating approximately 900 through about Spanish contact, so 1500s or so. And at a site like this, that's a well-known site. It's been known about White Marl since mid-19th century, right around the kickoff of what I guess we could call scientific archaeology, 1950s, 1960s. You had some work by Robert Howard at the site. Unfortunately, he died in 1964 before he was really able to dig in and publish this. So since 2016, as a result of infrastructural development, highway expansion or proposed highway expansion, we've been back at White Marl using archaeology, using technology. I should say, though, for all those sites, a variety of them are located on sites that are significant to global history. Good. Yeah. But there are also sites that have been slated for infrastructural development. So all of this work in Jamaica, I mean, our motto here, our national motto is out of many, one. I'll tell you what, I am one of many, we need more. Trust me, we need more archaeologists down here, but I've been one of many collaborators that have been digging in on these sites, including Leiden University, including local government agencies, Jamaican National Heritage Trust. So I've got to definitely specify their involvement, because it's also been a huge impetus for the inclusion of more technology at these sites. I'll tell you, we deal with a digital divide down here in Jamaica, the global South period. Sure. Collaboration has been key, not only whether it's funding, but also bringing specialists down that we may lack, bringing technology down, or sending samples out to be able to be analyzed by that technology. So it's been collaborative use of technology out at those sites.
Well, I was wondering, when I look at Caribbean archaeology, I don't even know where to start, because it seems incredibly complicated with European colonialism, indigenous groups, African enslaved persons brought across. It seems like you have a lot of different narratives that could be told. You've got a lot of different settlement types, a lot of different life ways. What kind of technologies do you use specifically that can help you untangle some of that?
Yeah, look, recently I'll tell you, say at White Marl, we've some of the really high level archaeological science techniques that we've been using, including radiocarbon dating, a whole suite of new dates at a site that was last dated in the early 60s, have been vital to identifying, to better understanding a site that is large, has many different mounds, that has widely just been regarded according to a universal kind of calendar system, as well as treated that these populations that lived there went extinct relatively quickly, right? That once Spanish colonization begins, within a generation, the majority of Taino would have been extinct. And look, what we're finding with radiocarbon dating is you've got an extensive site that is occupied, differently at different times. You've got dates coming from some of these burials that extend beyond the point of Spanish contact. So Spanish contact in Jamaica is 1494 on Columbus's second voyage. The Spanish first set up via Seville La Nueva on the north coast, early 1500s. By 1533, though, they've set up Villa de la Vega, our Spanish town now, right next to White Marl. We have a burial. So 1533, they set up that new capital. We've got a burial that dates as old as I don't want to misquote this, but 1620, I think, 1641, actually. Sorry. So that really, really throws that extinction narrative into question, which at this point is incredibly valuable, not only aligning with larger movements in the Greater Antilles and internationally with a Taino Renaissance, but for creating a space in contemporary Jamaica for Jamaicans to identify as indigenous, Amerindian, as Taino. And look, advanced technology is just going to aid that case beyond radiocarbon dates even further. We're working on now beginning a project comparing ancient DNA, samples of ancient DNA from some of these burial contexts that we've identified or that have been curated in collections in Jamaica, testing the ancient DNA there and then comparing that to contemporary Jamaicans. So we can really address that question of extinction or continuity. I'm one to think we're dealing with continuity. So and there's other sides to that, Taino's story, out of many one in Jamaica, that includes these first peoples. We've, through collaboration, Leiden University, Corinne Hoffman, she spearheaded a project out of that university and involved a number of universities called the Nexus 1492 project. And a strong basis of that project is to apply technology and do some serious archaeological science. And 3 of the burials that we identified in White Marl in 2016, this was recently published in the International Journal of Osteoarchaeology brief report in 2018. We did the radiocarbon dating, but we also did oxygen isotope analysis on bone collagen, and then starch grain analysis on teeth of burials, finding remarkable things. What these individuals, what a 9 to 14-year-old girl who passed away approximately between AD 1301 1409, which was eating, which included the earliest evidence of cacao, chocolate starches yet identified in the Caribbean, right? So you are what you eat, right? It's on your teeth. It's also in your isotope, your carbon and nitrogen strontium isotope signatures. And what we're finding with the burial evidence at White Marl, most of the burials, the 3 that we've tested so far, they're pretty close to the standard strontium range that you would expect for these populations, largely eating C3 plants. But there was one burial that doesn't match up to that, and likely indicating that just because you die at White Marl doesn't mean you were born here or lived the majority of your life here. Perhaps you came from a different part of Jamaica, or perhaps you came from a different island or region entirely. I mean, the interaction networks between the Greater Antilles involving Jamaica, but also into Central America, South America, were vital to these civilizations. So We're finding out a lot using again material science, archaeological science from these burials out at White Marl to really reinforce this story of the first Jamaicans.
Okay.
Well, cool.
Well, on that note, let's take our first break, and we'll come back and really dive into some of the technology on the other side. Back in a second. Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code Archaeotech. That's ARCHAEOTECH.
Get 15% off a set of BrakeMess Select, Select Pro, or Import Direct brake pads and 2 rotors now at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
All right, welcome back to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 113, and we're talking with Zach Beier about his work in Jamaica. And Zach, I'd just like your thoughts on something that really belongs on another show, and not the Archaeotech Podcast, but you mentioned at the end of the last episode, how we can tell where people were, where people have lived based on their teeth and their, the strontium isotopes and what's in there and where they've been, and how, while they're not necessarily born or even died in one place, they could have lived somewhere else entirely. And you can tell that. And we often find that in areas like that, I think, because our own, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like our own biases towards this modern idea that we have of family and, everybody wants to stick around home and stay there. But in an area with relatively abundant resources, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just move around? So getting out of our own heads and saying, hey, these people explored the area, moved around, and stay mobile.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's people that know the sea. They're using it as a highway. And there's also, and Bill Keegan's work on this topic, there's also a variety of interesting kinship systems that, again, where you're born, then who you marry could determine a different part of the island or a completely different island of where you actually stay. Keegan's work in the Bahamas has really, really narrowed in on avunculocal residence patterns and how that is then going to be materialized or perhaps reflected in an archaeological record if we're actually doing anthropology, which I'm one of those folks that we're studying culture, we're studying humans, we're studying their experience. So most certainly population sizes in the Caribbean, they get quite large, but these are populations on the move. And the evidence coming out at White Marl is showing you an extensive site, one that's continuously occupied for almost 1,000 years, but with populations that are likely quite fluid and moving around the island and between other places as well.
Okay. Well, one of the ways you can see some of that, hopefully, and we'll find out, is as you mentioned in your in the bio that we read at the beginning of this, you guys utilize some drone aerial surveys, and we have a mandate on this podcast, don't we, Paul, to mention drones at least once every episode.
Yep. Drink.
Well, so can I talk about drones right now?
Absolutely,
drones,
man.
Drones.
If you don't, Chris will.
I feel I'm like in a confessional session right now. Drones changed my life. Let's be perfectly honest.
That's awesome.
I want DJI Mavic Pro to quote me on that and maybe toss us a little bit of support down here. I'll tell you, when I began my dissertation research, island of Dominica, fort site, large site, so the aerial views, 3D models, amazing looks that I've been able to recently, within the last year and a half is when I first got into it, flying drone in Jamaica, would have just drastically improved my understanding of that site, and as well as just the presentation of it. I think drones for me have been a way that sites like White Marl I've mentioned, campus archaeology sites, forts around Kingston Harbor. I hope I just don't lose it in the water there. It's been incredible to get, again, the kind of the macro view of these places, locate areas that, again, teamed up with historical maps. I'll tell you, we've been doing that recently with Kingston Harbor forts, doing with permission, JNHT, Jamaican National Heritage Trust, Port Authority of Jamaica, creating orthomosaic images, really detailed aerial views, along with 3D models of these areas for study, for research purposes. I mean, at one of these forts, we're now able to pinpoint this very large, but only visible from the air, soldiers' barracks that once this fort became a female prison in the 1950s, it would have been covered over with a variety of other things. So we've now identified that, and that is one of these areas that we've pinpointed for further excavation. So drones have really opened up that type of research precision, but also tell you, when I'm dealing with and collaborating with local developers or government agencies, being able to show them an image of an archaeological site, a feature with development directly aligned with it or on the way to it, really powerful. So I have to thank all those drone engineers, Mavic Pro, well, DJI, but also Drone Deploy. I use a lot of that. It's way too expensive.
Oh, that's good.
The monthly, I'll tell you, we're university lecturers in archaeology in the Caribbean. We're not making much, but I'll tell you, they've designed just a fabulous platform to do this type of work. And I remember in undergraduate, my God bless Charles Orser, talking about flying in hot air balloons to get good aerial videos, right? And shots. I don't think we need. That sounds fun. I would rather be on the ground though, flying my drone. I'll tell you what. So it's been phenomenal with the work that we've recently been doing over in Jamaica.
Well, like you mentioned, you hope you don't lose your Mavic Pro in the water, but if you're in a hot air balloon, you might lose yourself in the water. So I'll take the Mavic Pro lost in the water anytime. Look, and out to sea in a hot air balloon. Agreed. And my wife, my family, they strongly agreed too. I have queried again, and I queried solutions to, beyond getting good, insurance and a warranty that if you crash, you got a year to return it, but you have to find the thing. If either it's inundated in water or in deep bush, I need another way of tracking these things. So I'm going to look to Archaeotech listeners and maybe you all to figure out good solutions to find our drones when they get lost.
No.
There you go. Nice. Are there any restrictions on drone use from the government? We've talked to other people using drones in other parts of the world, and sometimes there's pretty heavy restrictions. So do you need a license to do this for academic or commercial work, or like you do in the United States? Or, what's the story down there?
Yes, I think the official line, government in Jamaica, is flying around sensitive areas, obviously airports, heavily congested areas against the law. There are I get permission from the agencies that are in charge of archaeology or that are controlling these properties, but there's also permitting for professional drone flyers. I'll tell you what, drone over here hasn't really reached the point of historic preservation and archaeology, but for parties, for music events, there's drones everywhere, right? So yes, they do have policies, they do have permitting processes over here dealing with drones, especially following, internationally what we're hearing about what people flying drones next to airports and all this kind of stuff. But in the Caribbean, one of the many challenges is going to be actually implementing policy, right? To my knowledge, in the sites that I've worked at close to government properties or other kind of protected areas, there hasn't been jammers or trackers or that type of thing. I'm not concerned, but obviously those things should be in place, especially on small island nations with heavily traveled plane corridors. They're all over the place. Yep.
Right.
I would think, especially too, if you're doing forts, those are frequently next to ports and in a lot
There you go.
of ship traffic, and therefore you might not be able to fly directly over that if you have restrictions about flying directly over people as well.
Yeah, and this is why I underscore collaboration, whether it's Jamaica National Heritage Trust monitoring or managing these places, or the Jamaica Defense Force, which, like you just said, these would be the guys located. Some of these forts have been transitioned into JDF properties, but there are at least zones that they're monitoring. So I'd rather not get in trouble with the Jamaica Defense Force. They're highly trained and mean. So
Nice.
Yeah. So Zach, also reading over your bio, one of the things that stuck out to me is we're switching gears here away from drones. Sorry for all our listeners that come here for the exclusively drone content. But you use the term big data, and I just wanted to highlight that because when we talk about big data in general, I'm usually a little skeptical as to applications in archaeology. I think our data sets are too small, and we tend to like very specific things. Very concrete measurements, very concrete relationships. The big data tends not to be optimized for. So I was really curious to find out what you meant by that and how you're using it.
Yeah, and again, this is my involvement with a database that's based out of Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, World Heritage site. I'm not sure of World Heritage anyway. They do tremendous archaeology there on that plantation site, and now developed a program, the Digital Archaeological Archive of Comparative Slavery. And so it's based out of labs there, but they've got a very multi-sited United States, Caribbean, and they may have even explored areas outside of that now, all based on, the comparative study, archaeological, historical analysis of transatlantic slavery. I would argue that the study of that system requires individuals to get their head around big data, right? And analyzing something as global and as something as penetrating as slavery from a single site, from a single artifact assemblage. I think that could be troubling. This was a system that changed in the same time across regions, right? So comparing different sites across those regions, I think is valuable, and then comparing change over time. So one of the reasons I really I worked hard to get involved with those folks, and I just got to bless up Dr. Fraser Nyman, Dr. Gillian Galley for facilitating that involvement. Is the inclusion of military sites. Slavery is so often imagined as a very agro-industrial enterprise. So the plantation becomes the main unit of analysis in historic archaeology of transatlantic slavery, when in reality these forts were built by, maintained by, later actually included enslaved African soldiers. So I wanted to include that data set into the DAX database to contribute what is, like you said, relatively, we had about 15,000 artifacts, 3 to 4 different sites in my database, but then comparing that to over 50 probably or more, and I don't want to misquote their reach at this point, but they've been working for well over a decade on the systematic integration of data sets from sites across the transatlantic slavery kind of spectrum. So I would say that's almost a big. I would argue that is a big data enterprise. It's the archaeology. Yeah, and I don't mean to big data archaeology, because I think it is. It's a buzzword, right? But I think if we embrace that these big kind of impactful modern world processes takes all the data and collaboration that we can muster, mixed with computer science query-based kind of analyses, targeting patterns within sites and across sites. I think it's a good look. I think that's a good step in the world of archaeology. Yeah.
No, I think that's a really good answer, because I hadn't considered that. I was only considering on the site or maybe the regional level, but not as a worldwide phenomenon like colonial slavery would be.
Yeah. Well, and I hope to take that same type of approach that Dax is. I mean, my idea is always not to view any of these forts or whatever the sites in isolation. So thinking about a similar approach to forts that's really embracing this buzzword, but this reality of big data. Yeah. And trying to make it work for people. So oftentimes, archaeologists, we got really good data. We're just not really good at communicating it, and that's why we need drones and computer science and digital design and all that, and podcasts. God bless y'all.
All right, so we're nearing the end of this segment and the end of this show, Zach. I want to know, since this is a technology-focused show, what technologies have you guys tried down there? I mean, everything from, tablets, computers in the humidity, whatever. What technologies have you tried that actually failed, that you didn't end up using, or you didn't get the results you expected?
Well, I will say, again, based on my current location, Global South, we're dealing with a digital divide. The idea of having a funded program where there's a handful of maybe site directors that have access to iPads. I can use my own book grant. I'll get an iPad. But we haven't reached that point yet. But this is this is the goal. This is the goal. I'll tell you recently, and I wouldn't say it hasn't worked for us, but we're still working on it. Is we recovered at White Marl, this Taino pre-Columbian settlement dating between around 8900 to about, let's say, 1600 through Spanish contact. We recovered the Yui Mona team of archaeologists, along with the Jamaican National Heritage Trust team of archaeologists, a pot burial. So it's a ceramic pot. These have been found before at White Marl, one other one, but it was I think it was in the 60s. But it's a ceramic vessel with human remains on the inside, right? Without excavating or essentially destroying this really significant, delicate feature, we tried to do a CT scan. So again, collaboration, contacted UE medical team. Michael Gardner was my point of contact over there, along with specialists from the JNHT, and we took in this pot, ran it through the CT scan, got the data, and we're now working with bioarchaeology specialists over in Leiden University, Dr. Haley Mickelberg as well, included there. But it's been a bit fuzzy, I'll tell you what. We're getting back mixed readings. Maybe this is the CT scan technology that we have access to over here. It's very hard to separate the bits and pieces of soil, stone, other inclusions from what is likely at this point a pretty fragmented human body, likely a baby. But there've also been pot burials found with adult cranium inside. So we still don't know what it is, and we still don't know if it'll necessarily work. But you don't know if you don't try, right? And these efforts with the use of technology means that pot burial that was imagined as a forever place, it's a very significant spiritual item. It now doesn't need to be dug through, destroyed, as long as we can, and we'll continue trying to use these non-invasive technologies in archaeology. Yeah. So it hasn't really worked yet, but I hope it does, and I hope we have more to talk about. Yeah.
Well, and with stuff like that, it might just improve over time as well. You're right. Yeah. So.
Well, and I want to say there's a clear, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but there is a clear divide with the use of CT scan, drones, microscopes in something like archaeology over in the Caribbean, over in Jamaica. I'll tell you what, I'm in the humanities over here. That oftentimes sets you up more to be referred to in the same breath as poetry than in hard science or serious laboratory science, right? So we're dealing with a certain lack of connection that I hope my presence and work over here will benefit. And look, and I'll just say beyond that, in terms of failures, the Sokia Total Station, I think I forgot what series I have, CX series, I think. I'm not trying to put them on blast, but that has been one of the hardest systems to. And I was familiar with total stations beforehand, but now I think I've lost it entirely. So, for your listeners, Sokia CX series, that's a hard one to get your mind around. And maybe there's a listener out there that can really help me on the right track. But I've struggled in the field when it's sweaty, it's raining, it's miserable. I need a bit of help from Sokia.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Well, that's about it. All we have for today. So we'll probably get some links from you about where people can learn more about some Jamaican archaeology and what you guys are doing down there. But for now, Zach, thanks for coming on the show.
Paul,
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Paul, Chris, and your viewers, I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk about technology, Jamaica, archaeology.
All right. Perfect. Well, thanks a lot, Zach. And we'll hopefully have you back on again sometime when you improve those CT scan results.
Hey, there you go. And I'll have drone stories. Hopefully I don't lose it. But,
that's right.
Much respect, guys. Much respect.
Hey, thanks a lot.
All right.
Take care.
You may have heard my pitch for membership. It's a great idea and really helps out. However, you can also support us by picking up a fun t-shirt, sticker, or something from a large selection of items from our TeePublic store. Head over to arcpodnet.com/shop for a link. That's arcpodnet.com/shop to pick up some fun swag and support the show. All right. Welcome back to the Architect Podcast, episode 113, and this is the App of the Day segment. And on the last episode, I reviewed the new announcements from Apple, and I've had a little time to play with some of those things. And one thing I want to highlight in particular that I think is actually really beneficial for everyone, but possibly even for archaeologists who are out monitoring or something where they're not in a forest or out in the open desert like they usually are, where it's nice and quiet. But it's the new decibel meter on the Apple Watch. Now, you can download decibel meters for your phone all over the place, but the downside is you, of course, have to pull your phone out of your pocket or your backpack or wherever it's at, open up the decibel meter, and if you've got a case on it, you're probably affecting how the sound is coming into that microphone, and maybe it's not that accurate, especially if you're holding on to it, you've got gloves, something like that. Well, I've got the Watch Series 5, which is the... the minute I say Series, all my Siri devices take off and go nuts. But I've got the Watch Series 5, and I updated it to OS 6, and I updated the phone to iOS 13. And with that, I got the decibel meter on this watch. Now, it's really, really cool. Like, we were I just turned all this on Friday before we're recording this, and we're recording this on a Tuesday. And on Saturday, we were down at a wedding in Las Vegas, and when they were playing the music for the dancing later on, I turned on the decibel meter and it was pinging around 90 to 99, which is like super loud. Yeah. And it was giving me these warnings saying you're in a dangerous noise environment. You better not stay there very long. And I was like, Jesus, we never know these sorts of things, right? I mean, you know intuitively that it's loud, but are you able to really quantify how much damage it's doing to your ears? And the nice thing about the decibel meter is they made a watch face for it where it puts the decibel meter on the bottom with this graphical format, and then a few other things that you might want up there that you can kind of change. But it's a really neat watch face for that. Now, I really loved it. And if you've got the decibel meter on all the time with that watch face, it will you don't have to actively do anything. You just pull up your watch, look at it, and there it is. And then if you are in a heavy noise environment, it will tap your wrist and ping you and say, hey, you're in a heavy noise environment, because maybe you didn't realize it. Maybe you're drunk. I don't know. But maybe. Whatever happened.
At a wedding.
Maybe. I know. Well, I mean, there you go. A wedding in Vegas, no less. I can't even talk about it. So
stays there, right?
That's right. That's right. So anyway, it was really cool because for those reasons. Now, one thing that you get with the new OS, the new watch, as I mentioned, is a longer battery life, which I can tell, you always get a longer battery life because they always increase battery technology year after year, and they always increase efficiency of the software and the programs. So they actually use less power. So those things increase battery life. Well, by installing the new operating system and this new feature on a watch that doesn't have the increased hardware or hardware acceleration or battery life, my watch almost never dies, but it's died the last 3 days in a row by like 8 o'clock at night. So, and I haven't been doing anything crazy. And the only thing I can think of is I put this new operating system on, and the only thing I can think of that's running in the background is the decibel meter. So I took the watch face off, and it seems to be doing better now. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I have my watch on since 5:30, and it's down to 72%. So that's about normal. So, yeah, I don't know. I really like the feature, but I would caution you about battery life, especially if you're not buying the new watch and you're installing watchOS 6 on an older watch, even the Series 5 like I've got, which is just last year's watch. So, yeah, that was a short one today, but I really like I didn't actually even think I was going to get it. I was really surprised to see it on there because I thought it was going to be a feature they reserved for the newer watch because of the hardware and the battery. But nope, I got it on mine, and I'm not sure. They have the ability to restrict this farther back. So if you've got like a Series 3 or something like that, or a Series 4, I don't know if you'll get it or not. So it might not be a problem. But anyway, it's kind of a neat feature. So.
Well, run for a couple days without it and see if your battery life goes back up, and then report back to us so we know. Exactly.
That's exactly what I'm doing. So, all right, what do you got today, Paul?
Well, just a couple random notes. I don't have any new app that I've been playing with lately. I have one that I downloaded today. I might review it next time, but I haven't had the chance to work with it much. I managed to forget my usual microphone in the country, and so I'm speaking on a headset. So if I sound different than normal, that's why. But not sure if I had the headset in the house. I downloaded an app called Microphone, which lets me use my iPhone as a USB mic. So I'll play with that a little bit and get back to you as to whether or not I find that useful. So aside from that, then the notes, I think it's hilarious that Series 5 sets off your Siri, excuse me. Well, series because it's Siri on multiple things. Never mind. Because that was one of my notes is that I've started teaching a class here on Wednesday evenings at Cooper Union on the art and architecture of the ancient Near East. And so every time I say Assyrian, Siri pops on and tries to do some lookup right in the middle of class. It's really disruptive. I know that I can turn it off before class, but I don't think of it. I do put my phone on silent. I put my computer on, I turn notifications off on my computer. I quit out of all my email clients and everything just so I don't have stuff popping up while I'm trying to teach. And yet Siri keeps on chiming in because in order to turn it off, the only way I've been able to find, you have to go into settings, scroll down until you see Siri and search, and then turn off listen for Hey Siri. Which apparently, by the way, I say it sounds exactly like Assyrian. Or vice versa. Nice. I looked to see if there's a shortcut to do it. I looked to see if I could add it into the control center, and it doesn't seem like I can toggle Siri on and off easily. So it's just a few extra steps, a little more hassle than it needs to be. Another thing, I mentioned Google News a few episodes back that I've been using. I continue to use it, and I continue to like it. I still have troubles with with opening up things in Safari, and now with the new version of the iOS, it buried it just a little deeper. When I go to open something in iOS, I have to hit the share button and then push the panel up to see open in browser. It took me a few times before I realized that because there's no indication that there's more stuff down below the bottom edge of the screen. So, why would I look there? There wouldn't be. It looked like the entire panel had popped up, but the entire panel hadn't popped up. So that's been tripping me up. I think that's a feature of iOS, not a feature of Google News, because I think I've seen it in similar sort of pop-up plus more if you grab that tab and push it up a bit. That's just a heads up for anybody that seems to have lost options for sharing from whatever apps they're using. The other thing about Google News, though, that I found a little kind of perplexing is that every now and then I get news articles that come through from BBC Gahuza. And I don't know what Gahuza is because as far as I can tell, it's probably East African language, but maybe not like a recognized language, but more like a pidgin language. And it's phonetic it's written phonetically with the ASCII alphabet, and I think BBC are the only ones that use it. So it's odd every time I see a headline come up and it looks like gobbledygook to me, and then I look more closely and I see the little BBC Gahuza badge. I haven't seen that actually for about a week now, but now I get the same thing basically with BBC Somali, transliterated with ASCII. So At least Somali I can deal with because of all the time I spent in Yemen. I kind of feel like there's some sort of cultural zone there around the Arabian Sea. Not that I speak a word of Somali, but at least that's interesting to me. At least that I can see why it might possibly, based off of the kind of articles that I have in my feed, it would pull that up. But the BBC Gahuza thing just baffles me. So if anybody listening to this can explain to me what that is, all my Google searching turned up absolutely nothing other than, oh yeah, this is BBC doing something for some people somewhere in Africa, which is for me pretty useless.
All right then. Well, that's weird.
Yeah, really weird.
Yeah. Every once in a while, I get a website pull up thinking I'm somewhere totally wacky, and I'm wondering, it's based on your URL and where not your URL,
your location services or the route to the website as it detects it, whatever.
I feel like if you navigate to a website and you've been on a bunch of other websites and that website is pulling up in French or Italian or something like that because it thinks you're there, that you probably went through some other website that's doing some wacky things to you right now. Like it maybe downloaded some code and it's doing some interesting things. So I think it's time to clear your cookies in history
and is sending all your search traffic to somebody in Bulgaria.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, all right. Well, I think that's it. If you have any questions for Zach, our previous interview, the first part of this episode, then please send them on over. You can comment on the Archaeology Podcast Network page for this show, archpodnet.com/archaeotech/113. You can also send me an email, chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com, or both Paul and I's Twitter handles and everything is all on the website at that same link I just mentioned. Also, if you have any guest recommendations, if you're working with somebody, if you are somebody that's doing some cool things, even if it's not Archaeotech related, we got lots of shows on the APN and we can find a home for you and a host for you and get your information out to the world. Because like Zach said, archaeologists are really good at collecting data, but they're not very good at disseminating data. And one of the ways we can do that is really easy for you to do is on a podcast. And we get thousands and thousands of hits from people around the world. And it's a really good way to get your research out there and really just inform the public and other archaeologists about what you're doing. So, all right. Well, I think that's all we've got this week. Paul, thanks for coming on and invoking everyone's series. And now they're all turning it off.
I hope I didn't. And I hope I taught them how to turn it off for the duration of the episode or their lecture or whatever.
Well, unlike Amazon, and I won't say the name because it will turn everything on if you say it. And I think they like that by design. So if you go into somebody's house, you can actually activate their device by saying the key phrase, right? But Apple actually got rid of that a few years ago on one of the operating system updates. It's now keyed to your voice. Your devices should be. And that's why I can say it and it doesn't invoke my wife's devices, but she can say it and it doesn't invoke my devices. And it's mostly good. If you have somebody with a similar tone of you, it could still set it off. But I should be able to say, "Hey Siri," and only have my watch and my phone. Yep, there they go. Activate and nobody else's.
I seem to remember that being a minor plot element in maybe a Neil Stevenson early one of his books where he talks about running through the library at the school and turning everybody's computers on or off because they all had voice activation. At the time, it seemed kind of ridiculous, and now it seems kind of real.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'll just leave you with this then. I was surfing the Apple TV last night on the trailers. We were looking at movie trailers, and there's a movie coming out. It's coming out sometime in the next couple of months, but it's called Death. There's an app for that. Ooh. And apparently there's this app that everybody downloads, like it goes viral, and people are, and it shows the exact second, like how many days, hours, minutes, seconds you have until you die. It doesn't tell you how you're going to die. And then people are like joking around. They show in the interview of the trailer, people are like, "Oh, look, 57 years. Oh, look, 46 years." And then this woman picks it up and she's like, 2 days and 3 hours. She's like 25. So
wait, why are we laughing at this?
Yeah, exactly. Apparently it turns into kind of like a Final Destination thing. Like if you try to thwart it, death will find you one way or the other.
Nice.
So yeah. Anyway, on that note.
On that cheery note, be sure to turn in next time.
That's right. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Paul, and thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Chris. See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Archaeotech Podcast. Links to items mentioned on the show are in the show notes at www.archpodnet.com/archaeotech. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com and paul@lugal.com. Support the show by becoming a member at archpodnet.com/members. The music is a song called Off-Road and is license free from Apple. Thanks for listening.
This show is produced and recorded by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, in Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.